and to tackle the issue of response to COVID-19 or post-COVID-19 intervention in higher education, especially when it comes to access to technology and other resources. And I think that where we all need to come together. It cannot be just a national or country problem. It has to be a global, problem to tackle. So I think the way forward is, again, to look at it from a global perspective, that everyone has to be involved to help developing countries and to pick up the speed as it was in during normal times.
Okay, wonderful. Dr. Johnson? Your mic
is on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Josh, for this forum and for having me here. Coming to the question, like the previous panelists have said, Corona has created challenges in the wake of the delivery of education. And as you would notice, it's not only in the delivery of education, and these challenges are associated with the kind of shocks that Corona has created. In the first place, no one anticipated a virus of this nature was going to overwhelm the world, so to speak. And so we were all unprepared. That's the shock. But in a place like Liberia or most developing countries, what we are really experiencing in those countries is what I call a double shock, especially in the context of the provision of higher education or education in general. For instance, if you look, I was just looking at the ITU database and I was shocked that simple things that we take for granted in this part of the world, in the developed world, for example, access to computers. We have a very, very low proportion or percentage of our population that have access to computers or even internet access at home. In Africa, the rate of individuals using the internet is about 28% across the continent. And for a place like Liberia, individuals with computer is 2.5%. Using the internet is 7.8. Let's say 8%. If you were to look at that within the context of a population at about 5 million and growing, you realize that that is just a drop in the bucket. And so that in itself provided a new challenge if you were to compare what is happening here with what is happening in Liberia. Yes, there was a shock to higher education, not only higher education, to the provision of education. My little daughter now is learning at home. She's in the kindergarten, but all of her schoolwork now is being done online, virtually. And so there was a period of transition from in-person education to virtual education. It was a little bit of challenge here because most of us faculty who do in-person teaching were not prepared for that transition, were not adequately trained, so to speak. But we were able to move it forward because we had access to one of what I call the fundamental tools for the provision of such education, computer and internet connectivity. That is not the case with a place like Liberia. I mean, I haven't been to the University of Liberia since 2012. But the last time I was there, when everything was highly concentrated on Capitol Hill campus, or what we used to call the main campus, I didn't see a projector. The classroom in which I taught was without electricity. Those are simple fundamental things. So I began to imagine what is going on. Internet connectivity was also a problem, although it has improved when I went back 2014 across Liberia, not at the university. I do not know the case of the university very well as I speak. People were able to access internet because they were able to buy or whatsoever the devices from the cell phone companies to use internet at home. So that in itself provided a new challenge on how do you migrate to a virtual learning process. But in the wake of that, it also provides us new opportunities. And what is it? That now we have the challenge now to think or rethink how we provide education. Are we still going to use the in-person method? Corona has told us, hey, we need to begin to think about some other ways. Is that going to continue like this forever? This is going to be the new normal. So now higher education institutions, people like Darrell Wakins, who've been writing a lot on ICT, and others at the University of Liberia now, will have to lead. I always like to put the burden on the university because I know it's a research, it should be a research university, to lead this whole thinking process. How do we provide not just education, but quality education using a virtual means like the internet or even cell phone? I was reading some time ago that the education ministry and a group of people were thinking about providing high school education through radio. That is an excellent idea. I'm a child who benefited from education through radio. I mean, I always remind my former workmate, David Brown, of how I listened to her program many, many years back, Katie's Corner. But I was the only one in my neighborhood as a child who could access Katie's Corner. Why? Because my parents were the ones who valued the importance of radio. Two, they were willing to foot the bills associated with buying battery. I'm talking about Tuckerberg here now. We used battery cells those days. Electricity wasn't across the city at the time, all right? But others couldn't afford it. So I'm thinking, okay, this is a good approach. But then it becomes a question of access. It's not just a question of availability. Yes, you can go to ELBC, you can go to any of the radio stations, you can make the content available on radio. But how many persons will be able to access it? Accessing it becomes a cost burden for most families, because now they have to do a substitution question. They have to address a substitution question. Well, in the time of crisis, do I spend the little dollars that I have on providing radio in order for you to access the school? Or do I spend the little dollars I have in ensuring your sustainability, providing you food to get through the day? So
Dr. Johnson, let's quickly, not to cut you off, let's hear from Dr. Walker and Dr. Singman. Dr. Singman, your initial comments?
Are you hearing me?
Yes, sir.
I want to say good morning from this end of the world. I'm in the mountains of Montana, and I see Dr. Wilkins, my buddy, and some of the other guys over there. I know this is a global discussion, but right now the panelists and most of the followers are from Liberia. That doesn't mean that because we're from Liberia, it's only restricted to Liberia. I also see my brother from Kakata, Professor Zawolo On. But let me say thank you so much to George and to the Eden family for this invite. This is an opportunity for us to look at the challenges we have that is going to be with us for a long time. And this is a long overdue revolution. And the pandemic is providing us this opportunity for us to start to look at the new normal. I teach and work in rural America. And just to piggyback on what Dr. Johnson was saying, as much as Liberia is where it is, but let's just come back a little bit to this United States. America is considered the greatest power in the world. In rural America, people don't have access to internet services. Dr. Wilkins, it's good that you're on here, and it's good, very good, that my alma mater, the University of Liberia, has elevated the position of, computer technology to the point of having a vice president. That puts us in the space for us to now talk about what education would be like post pandemic. Whether we like it or not, there has been a paradigm shift. And this paradigm shift is intended for us to start to educate our young people, and not too young people, in a different dimension. Yeah, I want to say thank you for this opportunity. This is one of the few times I've come again to be in the Doctors Club. I wanted to be with the guys from, but it's good. But the point is that in every other profession, and I will make this statement, I will start for now. In every other profession, we come to realize that they are so glued together. But ours, a profession that creates other professionals, will be loose. I think this will provide an opportunity for us to start being glued together. I know the kind of work that my brother Isaac does in Kakata and his environs. Thank you, Isaac. People don't say it a lot, but let me be the first to say here before we start this conversation, taking your own resources, your own time to go back home and just offer education to our educators is a wonderful thing. Thank you again for this invite, and let's talk. I'm ready.
All right, Dr. Walker, let's get your initial.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks so much, Professor Williams, for inviting me and my colleagues to this forum. And I just want to say thanks to all of those who are listening or watching. This maiden edition of the forum seems to be positioned for something that would be very impactful, not just for Liberia, but like my colleague said, but globally. But we are in Liberia. I am at the Cottington University. I currently serve as the Vice President for the School of Graduate and Professional Studies, and which is in Monrovia. And we've been having conversations with the national, and I also serve on the National Commission on Higher Education as one of the commissioners. So we have been struggling, we've been having dialogue and conversations on what we should be thinking, what we should be re-envisioning in terms of what education would look like. I mean, even now and after the COVID-19. So I am quite excited about the opportunity, and I look forward to this conversation. And in fact, Dr. Wilkins and I just came from an assessment visit, and we're looking forward to being in other assessment visits because schools are beginning to rethink the way we do education. Hybrid, traditional, or just online. And let me just say this very quickly. Dr. Wilkins and I were privileged to have been appointed by the Minister of Education to serve on a committee that crafted the initial standards for doing e-learning in Liberia. So I'm thinking that we are on the right trajectory.
Wonderful. All right, before we go to questions, we're getting questions from our participants on Facebook. What we want to do, first of all, is let's quickly delve into what the opportunities are. Let's highlight some of the opportunities. Before we get responses, we'd like to welcome our sister Georgetta, who's all the way in Belgium, Isaac Zawolo, our sister Eliza, Joseph Williams, who's there in Boston, Annette in Maryland. We have many others on Facebook across the country. Welcome one and all. Let's go to highlighting some of the opportunities, okay? What are some of the opportunities afforded us in more concrete terms? Dr. Walker, Dr. Gulafali, any of you can kick it off.
Okay, while Dr. Walker and Gulafali are still putting their thoughts together, let me just bring in here. I think there is a big opportunity we have here. And as much as the conversation is global, I would like for us to be a little specific on the Liberian child. And that brings Dr. Walker and Dr. Wilkins under the spotlight because they are right now at the front line in our country. The good thing about the two institutions, I did some teaching at the graduate school, Dr. Walker, for my partner for several semesters when I was in Liberia. And Dr. Wilkins, I'm a product of the University of Liberia. I also did some teaching at the graduate school there. The challenge we had before, which is for me an opportunity now, is that in 2008-9, when I was at the university teaching at the graduate school at Cotton, it was indeed a challenge for me to see graduate students in education who did not even know how to set up email accounts. Because I told them I don't give tests, I do my tests on, email stuff and other things. But in the couple of semesters I worked with them, 3-4 semesters I worked with those people. Some of them were not even young like me, but older than me. They were able to grasp at it. So what this brings to the table is that it creates a condition that since there is no face-to-face in most of these instances, people will have to learn more to understand the dynamics and the prospects that long-distance learning, that remote learning, that online learning will bring to the table. It also creates a condition for our students, those who want to learn, to have an opportunity to do a lot of research. Fortunately for us, there are volumes of ebooks, but we have to teach our students to do that. That's the positive side. There are some challenges that come with it. I think Dr. Golefali talked about that. The issue of internet connectivity or accessibility. And those are things that we can talk. Dr. Wilkins, one advantage he also brings to this discussion is that as the former head of the Telecommunication Corporation of Liberia, that provides an opportunity for him to wear two hats. As an educator from the University of Liberia, also member of the National Commission on Higher Education, and former head of the Telecommunication Corporation. So he brings almost three things together, and we can tap into that. My thinking is that there's an opportunity for all to sit and talk at the policy, educational policy level, and at the national level from Liberia. I thought I'd just share this in quick.
All right, let's quickly hear from, let's get a question. Let's take a question from Dr. Toba. He says to Dr. Wilkins, what is a specific plan? What specific plans are being undertaken by the University of Liberia in terms of addressing some of these technological issues regarding distance learning? And I think Dr. Walker alluded to it in many ways about plans by the ministry to set up standards for distance learning, but what specifically is being done by the University of Liberia, Dr. Walker, what's being done by Covington, and the two of you who are critical policy makers or contributors to the policy making process, what has been done nationally to address some of these or build bridges where we have, as we have at present?
Dr. Wilkins, I'll prefer if you would go first, because you and I, well, Dr. Wilkins and I, we've been working so assiduously together, and he usually talks about the bare minimums. And I would like for you, Dr. Wilkins, if you don't mind, to just craft, I will talk a little bit about the standards that we've crafted, but what are the bare minimum that each institution, not just Cottington or University of Liberia, but higher education across Liberia, what are those bare minimum that we need to address?
Okay, when we talk about bare minimum, we talk about three main things: electricity, internet access, connectivity, and a computing device. Or what I say, I say computing device. I didn't say computers, because we have mobile devices that work as computers now. And I was hearing somebody talking about internet connectivity in Liberia. It's low, but we have a higher mobile penetration. So internet connectivity, access to internet is not as bad as it was before. We have made progress. Like I said earlier, every crisis comes with challenges and opportunities. When Ebola came, it came with challenges, but then it provided some opportunities. We were able to benefit from the Ebola, Ebola funds led by President Obama. So we were able to build our national, or metro fiber optic network. So we benefited from in 2011, the ACE, Africa Coast to Europe submarine fiber optic came into Liberia, and that increased our internet capacity, access capacity. And recently, C Squared is a combination of 4 companies: Google, I think it's IFC. And so we 4 companies, I just can't remember the fourth one, but they combined and built the metro network in Monrovia. And one of the beneficiaries, one of those institutions that benefited from that was the University of Liberia. I heard people talk about technology at the university. The university has changed. I can tell you that for a fact. One, we just built a campus network through assistance from USAID. We built a 700,000 fiber optic network, a campus network that should provide students access to the internet from every angle of the university. The university has at least 25 working computer labs. The reason why you hear the university doesn't have that is because of students were not actually given access to those labs. Okay, and not only do we have these computer lab, we have mobile labs. Okay, our engineering department has state-of-the-art equipment that I didn't even know they have until recently. So there's a lot of things that have changed as far as technology is concerned at the university. Okay, what did we do in response to COVID? Well, when I took over, I made sure that several things were put in place. Okay, and you know, the interesting thing, I was just looking at my book. I wrote my book 10 years ago. In that book, there was a chapter I wrote on e-learning. Okay, and I was just looking back, and some of the words that, you know, when you write something and go back the second time, you be like, whoa, did I actually write that? You know, so I'm looking, and I was telling a story about how I mean, I would go to school, and then I attended the university briefly, and the classes would be so full, I would have to stand outside and copy notes and stuff like that. So there was a need for something else, you know. And then there's a situation where courses were not provided during certain semesters, and students had to wait. So what was the alternative? The alternative was maybe have an online learning component that would, you know, kind of help solve some of the problems we had. So we started online learning before COVID. We were supposed to pilot it in March, and then COVID came. I think it was the 1st of March when the five or six nations shut down schools. First we thought it was just something not so serious, and then next thing you know, 1.8 billion students, you know, youth, children, ended up staying home. But anyway, the university has done a lot. We're supposed to go online soon. We've been doing online trainings through Zoom. We're preparing our faculty to provide online learning. You know, like I said, we were all caught. Well, most people are caught with their pens down. So there's a lot of things, you know, that need to be seriously addressed. Now, we have, you know, one of the mistakes we made in the past was the government didn't make computer literacy a requirement. So you have a lot of people, even senior students, without computer knowledge. And the question has been, well, it's not going to work in Liberia. Why? Because a lot of people are not computer literate, and you know, all these things. First of all, look, I told the faculty senate, I think yesterday's meeting, if a student, 80% of the students at a university, if not 90%, 80% of them have a Facebook account. The same 80% can do emails. They can send and receive email. And you're on Facebook, you can download and upload photos. You can post, you can chat. Those are the things you do online. Those are the things you do in an online learning program. The students, I'm not worried about. I'm worried about the faculty because they have to develop content. Yeah, and this is, for them, is a complete paradigm shift. Okay, so we've been having, we ended our second week of online trainings yesterday, and we have some face-to-face training, taking serious consideration, taking a health protocol seriously though. We're going to have 10 people in the classroom, but we've gravitated mostly towards the online training because the faculty we expect to be online, to teach online. So it's gonna it's challenging, but our faculty, the rapidity with which they've adapted, it's just, I didn't expect it, to be honest with you. So bottom line, we're getting ready to do some things online. At some point, hopefully, COVID-19 goes away. Online learning is not going to go anywhere anytime soon. Because I think you heard Dr. Walker, he just mentioned that we just developed a national policy and standard. So that's not going to go. The university itself has an internal policy for that. So even if we don't have full online program, blended learning is going to be here for some time.
We have a question for two. There's Duena who wants to know from all of the panelists, is there anything in place to ensure that multi-tier technology learning takes place within the educational sector? Are we preparing? Do we have programs in place to equip high schoolers and middle schoolers or junior high schoolers as far as computer literacy is concerned, so that when they arrive at the tertiary level, they're basically prepared? But what I hear from you, Dr. Wilkins and Dr. Walker, is that even at the tertiary level, the problem is worse. Now, like many of you, we've all worked school at the tertiary level before transitioning here into the US, and we know. And picking back into our conversation from last week, Dr. Topa, Mr. Bala, and the other panelists, Ms. Fury from Cottington, they amplify that a major hurdle in this process is getting instructional capacity up to par, especially at the tertiary level. Okay, and so the question goes: what are there any plans in place to kind of bridge that gap between tertiary level teachers and those at the secondary level? Is there any plans in place? And if there are, what can be done? What can we do as professionals out here working with the structures down in Monrovia and other places across the continent? What can we do to bridge that gap?
Can I come in?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I just wanted to speak to a couple of issues. And I want to thank Dr. Wilkins very much. He's done a tremendous job. And I know he's been in this thing for a very long time. I remember in 2012, we had the Liberia Business and Education Conference, where we're looking at issues in tertiary education. And a lot of things that he just spoke about, those things were raised years ago. And it's good that he was on the ground to see what was going on. And from that point, we had almost all of the tertiary education institutions in Liberia at that conference. And it's good that Dr. Walker here, and he talked about it. He's affiliated with the Commission on Higher Education. They were part of that conference. And some of the issues we raised, considering my background in the sciences, chemistry, for example, the University of Liberia have had their pre-existing problems or challenges before COVID. So in the sciences like chemistry, our labs have not been equipped to international standards. I'm not sure how the facility is right now, so I can speak to that. But when I was in Liberia, I know our labs were completely out of our standards, and we were using coal pots and instead of Bunsen burners. And I remember I have a photo with me that I showed at the conference of me doing an experiment on a coal pot. And my challenge to everyone was, how do we graduate from this to a more modern standard labs that are our students? Because the students are at the end of this whole thing. They are the end consumer. They get everything, every plans that we make, every facility that we provide. The students are at the end of the consumption line. So how can we make this student-centered? So we address a lot of other issues And the challenges was human capacity, especially for the University of Liberia, the Science College. We have few terminal degrees, and when Dr. Dennis came to the university as president, he made sure that we uplift, people to master's level teaching and then to terminal degree level. So the issue of human capacity is very important in meeting some of these challenges. Like having a professional Dr. working on the ground there, that shows how much we can, work towards meeting the challenge of IT technology, transitioning from the traditional or teaching and learning to our online teaching. And I'll share my experience here, what I, in the last three months of teaching at Spelman College, a liberal art college. And when we were transitioning to online education, the challenges are enormous, especially with what someone said about our teacher capacity on knowing how to transition to online teaching and using the various technology tools, Zoom, Facebook, just name it. So we had a lot of challenges with the sciences, particularly with labs. How do we do labs online? So I think those are some of the things where we need to be looking at the University of Liberia. What's the possibility? Do we have the internet connectivity to meet up with the demand of doing online labs? So I did ask my department some of those questions about the online lab possibilities and whether the IT can see whether we can go into online labs. Is it something we can do considering the bandwidth in Liberia with internet? I'm not sure of that. We can address that also. So my experience at Spelman College a couple of months ago has been very, very productive. We had the good side and the bad side. The good side was that I've introduced to a lot of things that I didn't know, okay, transitioning to online teaching. And the biggest challenge was that how students going to take this? Did they sign up for this? Are they going to meet up with the same standard, like academic integrity? So those are other things we can look at in Liberia. Though we trying to go into online and say, okay, there are some standards we might try to not force on students, but we also have to look into that for the future, academic integrity, and how our science students going to do their labs online. So I think those are the challenges from the science background I think we need to also address. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Golopali. Let's quickly welcome Dr. Adekoya. He's, from what I've read, he's from Cathedral High School, and he currently affiliates with the Northern Virginia Community College here in Virginia. Welcome, sir, and we're happy to have you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on the program. Granted that I was invited so on a short notice, but the issue of education and with the COVID-19 transitioning us to the online issue of education, I think it's a valid point my colleague just brought out. But of course, I do a lot of information technology, so those programs are already in place where students can register for a class. Both companies provide the virtual lab where students can go and interact with routers, switches, and all of those issues that deal with information technology. But as I see it, there's a need, there's a learning curve, there's a gap that needs to be filled in terms of what we are transitioning into, looking at the virtual environment. And on another note I would like to add to the conversation is that the teachers need or professors need to be trained when it comes to this virtual environment, because the challenges Northern Virginia community had when we moved into this environment, the students as well as professors were having issues how to interface with all of the technology out there. And the good thing about it, these technology are not new. They're already been in place. It's just the fact that they were only used in the virtual environment for those of us who were teaching online. So those tools were already out there. Looking at it, there's a learning curve, I would say, and then once the learning curves are addressed, then we can start gradually moving into the online environment where now Africa will have a better chance to have well-seasoned professors to come in and teach some of those universities within Africa online, because that way our students will get the educational training they need from the diaspora. I want to thank you very much for this platform, and I hope my contribution is worth taking. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Professor Williams.
Yes,
Professor
sir.
Williams.
Before you speak, sir, go ahead,
you know, yes, in terms of due diligence, one of our listeners, I think, asked the question, what is being done, you know, to prepare, you know, the schools for this current situation and post-COVID. And I want to quickly, just very briefly, give a quick highlight. The Minister of Education in Liberia is the chair of the Commission on Higher Education in Liberia. His deputy, Professor Detong, is an IT professional. And so what they've been doing on the grade school level, we're having conversations at both levels. So at the grade school level, there's a lot of conversations going on as to how they can prepare the grade schools for an event as we are currently facing. So the fact that the Minister of Education and his deputy are part and parcel of the Commission on Higher Education and then the entire educational system, I think the conversation that is going on right now is very positive. I can see a lot of minds being renewed. And what we are calling for in higher education is a reform. There's a reform. We need a reform. And all of the things my colleagues have talked about, preparation for the teacher, availability of resources, in technological resources, access, electricity. All of these things are being discussed right now at both the tertiary and the grade level. And what is being called for is a total positive reform. And there's a diagnostic review going on right now of the entire education system in Liberia. And Dr. Wilkins and I are so excited to be having this conversation with our colleagues overseas, our brothers in the diaspora, because we all were there. And it's just good for us to continue to have this conversation to see how we can bolster the educational system in Liberia. So I'm excited that conversation is going on, and I'm looking forward to my contribution, your contribution, and to see how together we can make education what it ought to be, not just for Liberia, but contributing globally.
All right.
Mr. Williams.
Yes, sir.
And the point that Dr. Walker struck here is a serious point, and I appreciate it so highly. There's one point in all of the theory that we're speaking here. There's one point that we need to concentrate on, and somebody had talked about it regarding resource allocation. Just looking at the 13 people that are streaming right now on Zoom, more than 60% of them have at least a terminal degree. And more than 60%, and all the 13 people I presume have connectivity to Liberia.
Yeah.
Of the 13 people, only 2 persons or 2 individuals are presently engaged with the Liberian education system in a structural form. Dr. Walker, Dr. Wilkins. I know Professor Zaulo has been engaged and involved with work, and he still got his men on the ground, his men and women on the ground, sorry. And a lot of us have little here-there connectivity. Looking back at the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goal, that document is very significant, that document is very great, that document is very good. Dr. Golafali raised a point. And I'm having the same issue. Dr. Adik Koyat also talked about it. From Dawson here, where I'm a lecturer. We all are in the process of learning. Fortunately for whether it's Spearman, whether it's North Virginia, whether it's Dawson, and whether it is Montgomery, and all the other colleges that and universities that we're associated with here, fortunately there are funds available. Even though we're strenuous on them. Unfortunately for the University of Liberia and for Cotton University, I don't know whether they have the fund to take on these functions. And so while we are talking educational conversation, I would say here, and two of the members of the Commission on Higher Education are up here, that we need to source, get the Ministry of Education, the presidents of Cotonou and president of University of Liberia, University of Liberia being the highest institution of learning in the country, to now talk to national governments, because this is the new.
Yeah, he's on, but you gotta click it. You see that thing that says join?
Somebody is, I was just closing up. So we need to get those people involved in this conversation. Unfortunately, the SGD said we should have our SDG or 25%, that's the target of our national budgets to go to education, which we know is a little too high. But for instance, Liberia has only 1.7% of our national budget going to education. That's a drop in the bucket. And we have only 6% of children enrolled in post secondary education in sub-Saharan Africa. As it is now, if we continue on this path, we are preparing an illiterate society to manage the continent of 1.1 billion people. 6% in post-secondary education, we are headed in the wrong direction. I don't want to be the doomsday prophet, but we have to have a paradigm shift. The conversation is good, but our national leaders, our educational leaders, and those who have to make the decision to painstakingly say, for Liberia to move forward, all 13 of us on this chat right now, plus many Liberians outside, do what I consider, do some kind of, I think Professor Zawolo, if he stay on, but do some kind of sweep, catch all by the bootstraps and say, let's go back home and go and contribute. The national, it got to start from somewhere.
You're right. You're right. One of the goals of this gathering is to ensure that we can bring educators together. Unfortunately, on this panel, it's a male-dominated panel. So I ask you, go back to your networks and, attract to the panel as many female educators as you can, please. Two observers sent in questions regarding access and affordability. And we'd love anyone to speak to those two. Access and affordability for parents, access and affordability for students at every level, elementary, post secondary, and tertiary levels. We know access is easier and much more feasible for tertiary level students, but when it comes to the secondary and primary level, that's a challenge. Prior to the advent of these meetings, started a process where we were curating homework based on feedback we got from students on the ground, curating homework that included YouTube videos, info posters, and questions. Questions that could self-grade once a student completed it. And that process is so tedious, but it was an eye-opener that there are possibilities. The prospects are good if and only if we can coordinate, organize ourselves in ways that can enhance our intervention back on the continent, regardless of where we are. And like Dr. Wilkins said, we have the greatest of all platforms. Africa has the largest collection of its population using cell phones. Using cell phones anywhere in the world. It's letting our people know what viable access they have and how they can better use that platform to enhance learning for teachers, for administrators, for the students. And we're hoping these conversations can help first to organize us in terms of singularity of thought and then develop a process through which we can then intervene. So can we get a contribution when it comes to access and affordability for students and parents?
Well, for the Liberian, again, Dr. Walker here, for the Liberian context, access and affordability are a monumental, gigantic challenge. You know, not just at the grade school level, even at the tertiary level, it's still a monumental challenge. So that's why we are calling for a reform that will look into all of these variables, different factors, and see how we can address them and pool our resources together nationally, internationally, what I like to call local, you know, globally and locally, pull our resources together so that we can make education what it ought to be. One question I keep asking myself, why am I in education? In other words, why are we in education? How are we addressing the human development, human capacity development needs? What are the priority issues? So access and affordability are priority issues, and they must be addressed because they are gigantic issues that every sector of Liberia education is concerned.
Okay, can I come in?
Dr. Johnson, then Dr. Sengbe.
So the issue of access, the way we approach it is first we need to look at what determines access. I'm one person, yes, I believe in making things available, but availability becomes useless and non-impactful if that which we are making available is not accessible. In the case of delivery of education, in this, with which we are discussing now, we have to determine what makes it accessible. Darren spoke earlier about the improvement in connectivity, and I like the way he used a computing device. A good size of the population have access to some level of computing device through whether Facebook or whatsoever. But then we should look at the issue of depth versus breadth. Those who have access to those devices, where are they? What share of the total student enrollment of Liberia? Now I'm talking about both from K through 12 up to tertiary. What's their composition as a share of the total student enrollment of Liberia? Why is it those who do not have access to those computing devices are being left out? So then you begin to probe the question of whether inequality or inequity that exists within society. And that is where now this whole question of structural reform comes in and becomes very relevant. Okay, like the story I was explaining earlier, how many persons are able to put on the radio now? How many persons can afford the cost of battery as opposed to sustaining themselves daily? We have to think about these things in economic terms, and then we begin to understand what is really the challenge here. But coming back to it, talking about opportunities, even as we talk about access, it also brings us back to the question of what kind of education we want to provide. So thinking about delivery is one thing, but content is also another thing. In-person teaching is quite different, like someone said, from virtual teaching. The way you manage content, the way you deliver content, the way you produce content is quite different. And so then from a pedagogical standpoint, then goals and expectations of students, goals and expectations of faculty themselves, I don't want to say be reduced, but themselves have to be changed and in conformity with the context in which we operate. So we just cannot just say access. What drives access? Income, how many persons can afford cell phone for that matter in a place outside of Liberia? How many persons can afford the cost of connectivity, for instance? Those are things we need to take into consideration, and it brings in a bigger policy question.
Well, we got 3 minutes, unfortunately. These conversations can be, you know, in depth. We have Mr. Gabriel Carter joining us. Mr. Carter, where are you from? And Any contributions?
Thank you guys for having me on. Actually, a buddy of mine actually invited me to the forum when he talks about education, so I figured I'd come on. I think I just got on, so my I probably missed the entirety of the program, but I think I would say that I concur with the large gentleman who just spoke. You know, when we talk about education in Liberia, I think sometimes we forget to know that there's, you know, it's not, Liberia economics is not, you know, you have a middle class. We have either you're abject poverty or you're ultra wealthy, you know, and because we don't have a middle class, we have to think about education in that term. How do you make it, as you said, just to expand on what you were saying, how do you make that accessible? You know, I know that the last presidential election that was talked about, you know, making education free, right? That is, you know, I think that will actually help make it accessible, but in the sense that, how do you pay for that, right? You can talk about free education, but how do you pay for that? How do you pay for that in perpetuity? Do you have any you have a sovereign wealth fund to say, okay, we have this wealth fund that is aside we're going to invest in other investments, the return that we're going to use to pay for these things in perpetuity, right? And as I said, with assets, everything that pertains to Liberia is centralized right in Monrovia, right? The moment you leave Monrovia, education becomes, you know, non-existent practically, right? So how do you decentralize that to make it accessible to everybody? You know, so when we talk about access, we have to look in those terms. You know, it shouldn't just be just right in Monrovia, right? How do you get the county involved? How do you making education accessible is economics as well, right? So when you're making it accessible, you have to make sure that these colleges, the universities are able to partner with, you know, the companies within the country. So let's say I have a global company in the country, right? I have this university, let's say AMU in Liberia, right? There should be that partnership that if I need internship, I can go directly to that university, right? And get internship for them and get people from that I can bring into my company to work for me, right? So there's a multifaceted, you know, problem that, you know, education has in Liberia, you know, but I think in addition to looking at it from just an access standpoint, we have to look at it from an economic standpoint as well. Like most people can afford education, you know, most people can afford education. And for the most people that live in Liberia, they don't live right in Monrovia. They live outside of the county. They live outside of Monrovia. So how do you make that accessible to all the other counties besides Monrovia? You know, how do you implement that? You know, education is changing. You know, people are not going in physical classrooms anymore to learn. You know, everything is online. How do you do this? Do you bring the government on board to develop some kind of platform to do it, or do you, you know, take it on a private sector, and then hopefully the government come along? And how do you even convince the government to say, hey, this is how we see education, and this is how we want to invest in? You know?
Thank you, Mr.
I think it's going on, but I think that will actually.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Thank you so much for your contribution. We want to respect the time. We want to respect everybody's time. This forum is organized to run for 1 hour, which is woefully inadequate, but you know, so what we're gonna do is just maybe in 30 seconds, final closing remarks from our 4 panelists, Dr. Wilkins, Dr. Walker, Dr. Singer, Dr. Johnson, and Dr. Golofali, who's our special guest. And then we're gonna wrap it up and let you know what the next steps are, okay? So, Dr. Wilkins, final word.
Okay, first of all, I would like to say thanks for the invitation. It's been an honor sitting on the same platform with a bunch of elites. Briefly, the access talk here is that I would take it from an internet perspective. The government is doing a lot to ensure that students families and students have access to the internet. These are online learning platforms that we're developing. We're in negotiations with the GSM or MNOs companies, and they have agreed to provide zero-rated access to students during COVID. After COVID, then we have to make another arrangement. In addition to that, the government has a universal access program that's supposed to reach out to rural areas to give them access. Also, finally, the internet capacity that comes to Liberia, the government or the ACE cable, the government has 55% of that. Okay, MTN, Lone Star has about 15%, Cellcom has 10%, and the government has, the telco has 20%, and the government has 55%. Out of that 55%, the government has 15%. I mean, set aside 15% for education, health, and e-government. It is the 5% for education that we need to start thinking and putting into place the necessary mechanisms so that we'll be able to leverage it to benefit the entire population. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on this forum. And it's interesting to know how much progress government how much progress being made in Liberia in the direction of virtual education or online education. I think the important thing here is that we should also consider the fact that in as much as COVID has presented us a challenge, it also presented us an opportunity to think about the way we deliver and think about education, whether at the higher level or at the primary level, because you cannot develop a sustainable educational policy that leaves one in fear of the other. So we have to look at this thing as a part of, in a wider context and as a part of the broader development strategy.
Thank you so much. Dr. Gohali?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sir Williams, for inviting me on this forum. I mean, I've not had this opportunity before to be having these cross exchanges with professionals here. And two things I want to close up with. One is we have to bear in mind that students are at the end of the chain, and we have to be student-centered in all of our policies or programs that we intend to implement, especially in COVID-19 time. And another thing is faculty. And what I've been thinking on since we got on here is, as Dr. Sengbe rightly said, about 13 people here, and or more, there are more people that are in the diaspora than those at home who are actually on the ground. So if there is none, I will want to propose, can there be a diaspora response team that can address issues of access and affordability, particularly for teachers, instructors? From the science background, virtual labs are things that we can work towards, making it affordable for teachers to teach, and students can also have access to doing labs instead of the traditional lab that we cannot do right now because of COVID. So I want to stop here and say thank you all for having this great exchange. We have to continue not only the conversation, but putting our words into action to make sure that we take education to a better height. Thank you.
Dr. Samuel?
Thank you very much, guys. Unfortunately, I just got to say, gentlemen, the next time I know women will be here. I know women form majority of the population when it comes to education, especially K-12. Maybe in post-secondary, I mean, post-secondary is a little challenging. Well, I hope they will be here the next time. And thank you so much, Dr. Golafali, that you pick up that word. But one thing this platform has given me, one idea it has given me is that yes, indeed, we have a lot of quality librarians or people who are quality individuals in the education sector. In further conversations, it's good to have all educators, but it's also good to blend the conversation around education with individuals and people who have thoughts that are in the sector. Access and availability are positive and wonderful things. But what is most important is affordability.
Thank you. Yes.
You understand? And Dr. Wickens spoke about it. Government has made it accessible. They are available. Are they affordable? No, they are not. I come from Kambalahon, is a small town in Kolahon district in Lofa County. And I know people out there, they're not going to school. They don't have access. When I called there, I just talked to my auntie and the rest of the people from there yesterday. They have to find a particular spot to stand before they can have a means to talk to me. Do they have the money to buy the scratch cards? They don't. That's the affordability piece of it. Let's do something. Let's bring everybody on board. We are different people. We come from different thinking and the rest of it. And I always like to throw this thing out to my brother, Professor Zawulo, what he's doing in Kakata. My hat's off to you. I'm from Kakata. I'm from Lofa first, but I'm a BDI product. I'm from Kakata. Every time I see something happening in Margibi, I dance for it, and I'm so excited for him. Every time he packs up to go to Liberia, I celebrate him. I don't know whether he stay online or not, but I celebrate him. Those are pieces that people are doing. Dr. Walker, Dr. Wilkins, you guys are doing extremely well. You're back home. But, I mean, and as Dr. Golafali said, we have to harness it. It's nothing for us to discuss more because when I start talking about it, I get overly hyped. Thank you for this opportunity. Let's continue the discussion.
Yes, sir. Dr. Walker, I kept Dr. Walker last because Dr. Walker has offered to be the platform's coordinator in Liberia. And we're trying to identify coordinators across the region, especially within ECOWAS. First, let's say charity begins at home, so we want to begin at home first. And so Dr. Walker has offered to serve as our coordinator in Liberia. And so Dr. Walker, in this global manner, I'd like to say thank you for accepting to coordinate our activities in Liberia. And so I give you, instead of 30 seconds, you have a minute before we close this.
Okay, I had to coordinate in the number. So
Thank you, Professor Williams, for that recognition and acknowledgement. I just want to thank all of you for being a part of this dialogue. And one of the things I want to say is it excites me. I am all about human capacity development. And at this time in my life and for the rest of my life, God has positioned me within higher education, sector. So what needs to happen for me, I'm calling for an active collaboration amongst all of us. Those of my brothers in the diaspora, some of us lived there for almost 20 years before coming back, and we are back. We need each other. Conversations are going on. I want to say hats off to my colleagues at the National Commission of Higher Education, the Minister of Education, who's the chair, and things are happening, but we need more active collaboration. And I believe that this forum can be an active player within the entire framework in moving these issues that we've talked about forward. Again, I'm calling for a reform, and together, all of us can make that happen and can make Liberia a better place for our kids and our kids' kids and generations to come. So again, I just want to say thank you, and I'm willing to do whatever I can to make things happen because I'm a doer, I'm a mover, I'm a shaker. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Dr. Walker. As we wrap up, thank you all, Dr. Adekoya, Mr. Zawolo, Ms. Weatherspoon, Mr. Williams, Mr. Carter, all of you invited guests, thank you so much. Those by Facebook, thank you so much. Next Saturday, same time, same station, we're going to be looking at narrowing the educational resources and technology gap in higher education. That focus is going to be on higher education because from what we've seen and what we've gathered from here, it is essential that we focus a little more on higher education at this point in time and use that capacity to inform secondary and pre-secondary participants or segment of the educational sector. Thank you so much. Please look around, connect us through your networks to female educators so that they are part of this process as well. Thank you all, one and all. We're happy. We couldn't be more satisfied with your participation here today. Thank you. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend further. this video, recording of this video is going to be posted on our website, EDDEIN.com, before the end of the week coming. All right. So thank you all again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.